Welcome everybody to the Brian Piergrossi podcast. That's me, Brian Piergrossi. I'm with Sorinne. Sardine. We were trying to work on our last name, so I was trying to really get it right. Anyway, Sorinne Ardeleanu. Yeah, Sorinne
Yes,
Ardeleanu.
and it's
Welcome,
funny when you
Sorinne.
mispronounced my name, I thought of Italy.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Do not call her Sardine like I did. Call her Sorinne. Sorinne Ardeleanu. Yeah, so good to have you here.
Thank
And
you.
Sorinne is our first presidential candidate on the podcast. Very exciting, running for president of the United States of America. So I first became aware of you recently. I actually just had Satya Raja on my podcast. Then I saw he interviewed you. So I tuned into that interview that you did with him, and and then I was tuning in some other things that you were doing too, and just really impressed with what you were sharing. But what became like apparent to me, and where I kind of want to start, is so you've had a spiritual awakening. That's what became apparent to me, and just I picked it up pretty quickly, where you were coming from and where you were speaking from. So I'd love to. I mean, first of all, does that resonate as true for you? And I'd love to hear, if so, like if you could speak to that and kind of what your journey was like in that regard.
Sure. It's interesting because I've struggled with what to call it, because there are, people define awakening, enlightenment, illumination, sometimes the same way, sometimes differently. But I do believe that I have had a major shift in my consciousness and evolution, which has significantly, altered everything that I do in life, from the way that I think to the way that I speak to the way that I behave, where my life really isn't about me anymore. It's about everyone, all the pieces of me, because I do believe that we are one. That is not something I only have faith in, but that is a belief that I have. And I know that that is something that, many people only have faith in and not belief, which is different. And because of my experiences, to me, it is a fact. And I also recognize that for others, for it to become a belief, they have to also go through their own awakening, their own enlightenment, illumination, whatever they want to call it, to have this realization, that for others, this may just be a theory. And so I'm very sensitive about how I speak about it, because I believe we're all on the same journey and we're all in different places, and that there really isn't a comparison, that somebody could come to this realization in an instant and somebody could come to it in an entire lifetime. And there isn't a right or wrong amount of time. And so, I share that because I feel one of the things I've noticed, not just since starting, this campaign for president, but in general before then, there's a lot of people that don't seem to really understand spirituality. And they will judge people who I do believe are awake, and say that they're spiritually bypassing or something like that. It's like a very trendy word to cut people down. And so I try not to really emphasize that, because I feel that our actions really speak a lot louder than anything else. And so I really, that's why it matters what I do, because I know that really that's the only way that I can influence others and show people who I am. It's not by saying, I'm a spiritual person or spiritual being, it's by acting as one consistently, because it is what resonates with me the most.
Hmm. Did you have some particular experience or some particular experiences or challenges? I find for most people, it's some sort of challenge or difficulty that is the catalyst for them to wake up. And when I say awakening, I mean, I think you said it. To me, the awakening is an awakening to our oneness, to that separation or division is ultimately not real, and that everything that we see is a reflection of the one and only infinite self, right? And so, yeah. So, what was there a particular turning point or turning points for you that opened you up to that awareness?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I had to hit bottom a few times. And it was very painful, and it was very dark and lonely, and it was not a pleasant place to be. But it made me realize that I had a pattern that was self-destructive, and that it wasn't very loving, and that I could change the pattern, that I could have a loving pattern. And, when I think of self love, I don't just think of the little self, I think of the big self. And so, that was a big shift for me, recognizing that, I had to learn how to love myself in order to be able to love others, and in order to help others love me and also love themselves, because, we're all mirrors of each other. And, the really cool thing about being human is that we don't have to keep repeating these dysfunctional patterns. We can choose to stop them, and we can choose to live differently. And so, I'm not one of those people where I had an illumination and just instantly everything changed. It took time because, this happened in my early 30s. And, you know, even if you know better, you still have these patterns that you've been carrying around with you your entire life. And it takes time to change them. And you have to kind of, put your hand on that hot stove a few times before you learn, like, hey, this hurts. I shouldn't do this anymore. And so for me, it was a series of events, but the most significant one was in my early 30s. And, at that time, one of my best friends basically took me under his wings and introduced me, what I like to put under the umbrella term of metaphysics, which included quantum mechanics, neuroscience, epigenetics, and psychology and theology and the like. And it's through studying all these different fields that I started to be more consistent in my practice and to develop my own belief, where it went from faith to belief, because I believe to take this path, it goes against most of our conditioning. This isn't what we're taught. This isn't what society teaches us. This isn't what the media teaches us. And so when you go out into the world, there's all this temptation to essentially, behave very carnally, not as your highest self, because especially today, nobody really judges you if you don't believe in a higher power or God or oneness. It's versus, before our time, it was a big deal. And so I feel like it's actually more effort to be connected and tuned into the oneness. So that's kind of a long answer to your question, but I feel that it's important to share those pieces of my journey, because I feel that many people think that it's just something that instantly happens and you're instantly perfect. And that's just not how I think it works for most people. I think that for most people, it is an effort, and it is a practice of love and discipline.
Mm. And you're running for president. And where did that impulse come from? And yeah, where did that impulse come from?
Well, I had, a very challenging childhood, and I experienced a lot of pain and suffering. And I didn't want anybody else to go through what I went through, especially innocent children. And so I got into psychology in my undergraduate studies to understand what drives behavior. And I realized, this is about 20 years ago, that ultimately it's our values. And I thought that, if I want to make a positive impact in the world, I'm going to have to be in a position where I can impact values. And I realized that the President of the United States of America is the perfect position to be in to influence values, because I realized back then as well that our values come from the media. They come from whoever we deem our authority figures, our parents, our educators, our healthcare providers, and so forth. Um, and I was also noticing a lot of people around me pointing fingers at everybody else but themselves when it came to, why is the world the way it is, and being unhappy with it. But I didn't take it too seriously back then. It was just a very tiny seed and I didn't really talk about it. And then whenever I hit, my bottom in my early 30s, when I had this realization that I was creating pain in my life and that I could change it and experience pleasure and contentment and fulfillment. Um, Shortly after, I realized, I had a vision rather of people chanting Serene 2020, and it startled me, and I felt very uncomfortable because I have done many things that I do not regret, but that I would not do again, and that I know that many people get criticized for today. But as this year got closer and closer, and I was resisting and hoping somebody else would step up, I started feeling physical and mental and spiritual disease in my body. And I had overcome what some people have post-traumatic stress because of all the trauma I had experienced as a child. And so at that point, I realized, as I'm resisting, I'm like, I know better. The body never lies. And I felt called to go into this direction. And what do I have to lose? What is the worst thing that can happen? And I realized that I had the power to inspire others, to help others that also have insights and love and understand life to step up, And so to me, that really sounded like a victory. So I just started surrendering and doors open, and the campaign has grown very organically, and all the pieces have come very clearly to me. And here we are today.
Mm-hmm. What do you feel like are the values? You talked about values. What are the values that you want to bring forward and emanate more into the country?
Sure. So I want to be very clear that I am not a religious person at all, but I do study theology, not just the Bible, but I do find truth everywhere. And one of the values that really resonates with me that I want to emphasize is the golden rule. It's very simple, treating others the way that we want to be treated. And I've thought about this for a long time, like, why is it very difficult for people to do this? And back to me learning to master love, which I believe that I'm still working on, and I believe that's something that we all are supposed to be working on. I realized that because we don't love ourselves, how can we love others, right? So how can we practice the golden rule? Many people, like I used to be, are addicted to abuse or unhealthy relationships, in different levels of abuse. It doesn't have to be physical, it can be psychological, it can be very subtle, even passive aggressiveness. And it's not necessarily what we want at a conscious level, but because we've been programmed, it's in our subconscious level. And by programming, I'm talking about, again, the media is one of the easiest way to program people. And again, our authority figures, our parents, even though they may want the best for us, if they don't have positive role models in their lives, how can they teach us the right thing? And so as a conscious adult, I know, and that's what I've been working on, is reprogramming myself so that I do exude love in everything that I do. And, the golden rule is really, it's such a big thing, because I think about, well, if we applied it not just in personal relationships, but in professional relationships, right? Like, we would make different decisions in business, right? We would all do something that adds value. We would all, be our most authentic self, because if you love yourself, you wouldn't hide who you really are. You would develop your natural inclinations and gifts and share them with the world. And if we all lived in a world like that, I believe that we would all prosper and have peace. And that's part of my bigger image, is really, living in a world where people are encouraged to be their most authentic self, where it's safe to do that, and where people help each other out, not because out of fear of like going to hell, or there's a law that will punish you, but because people actually believe it's the right thing to do, and they understand how everyone, including themselves, benefits, when they practice the golden rule.
It's interesting when you listen to politicians, presidents, or politicians speak, or business leaders, CEOs, etc. You rarely ever hear the word love. You rarely ever hear them talk about love, which is actually the most important thing of all. Like, anybody that's looked even slightly deeply into life knows, like, love is what makes life meaningful and fulfilling, and it's why we're here, to learn how to express it. So to have a president that would speak to that and articulate that and communicate that consistently, I think that's really valuable and beautiful.
Brian, you've reminded me of something that's been on my mind that I'd like to share, um, just about love and just, a lot of people, I feel like what's going on, the reason that we are in the state of being that we're in today is that a lot of people don't understand who they are, what they are capable of, or why they are here. And when you do understand that, which I do, there is no room for fear. There is no room for compromise. Right? We have people pushing different agendas. There isn't an agreement. And if we can get people to understand that everything is energy and there's just one life expressing itself in all forms, and that there is a perpetual evolution of consciousness through form, I believe that that is when we will achieve that ideal state. And that's, really what I'm working on. And I haven't mentioned it before because it hasn't come up in a conversation. So I'm glad that I get to share this with you. And if you want to talk about it, we can. It's just, I think that that's really what it comes down to, is knowing who you are, what you're capable of, and why you are here.
That's what I saw when I said like a spiritual awakening. That's what I meant that I saw in you. It's like, oh, she knows who she is and she knows why she's here. And that's like, wow, it's kind of like was my prayer, to have someone running for president that was coming from that consciousness. So I'm sure this is all divinely synchronized and organized that we're connecting right now. It feels good. So how much of this can be done? I guess I want to explore how much of this can be done through, this is a big question, so kind of take it where you want to take it. But how much of this can be done through kind of like laws and punishment and rules, and how much this is done through kind of the president sort of exuding a vibration or a consciousness that people can feel, and so I guess kind of moving into how do we share this? How do we share this on a political level? Like what is enlightened politics? That was one of the things that was coming to my consciousness this morning, thinking about the podcast. Like what is enlightened politics? Like if it's coming from this consciousness, how is it different than what we have now? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, so I think it's a combination of legislation and vibration. And by legislation, I'm not actually talking about creating legislation to enforce or try to enforce morality. I'm talking about looking at the legislation we currently have in place that limits people's ability to self-actualize, because we have a lot of legislation that essentially interferes with the natural process of reaping what we sow. So people aren't understanding the correlation between cause and effect. And so there would be a lot of legislation that would either be removed or altered to not interfere in people's natural evolution of their own consciousness. Like one of the things I have thought about specifically is subsidies, and how many of the subsidies we have in place are, were created for somebody to profit versus what's truly good for the environment, what's truly good for humanity, and so forth. So that would be an area that I would address, the way that animals get treated in agriculture, for example. A lot of that has to do with legislation. It's not because people are trying to do the right thing, or, I don't have
like factory farming. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Then there, like I don't have all the answers, but I believe, for example, that the Native Americans were doing lots of things correctly when they took care of this country. Because I live in California, and in 2017 we started having these huge fires every year around this time of year, and I've lived in California since 1984, minus 4 years, but most of my life. And we never had anything like this happen before. And my understanding is because we have people who are well-intentioned, but don't seem to really understand nature, coming in and limiting, having a fire every year, apparently, is, from my studies, is a good thing. It helps prevent the bigger ones. You have controlled smaller ones. Again, I don't have all the answers. This is just what I've come up with from my studies. But I believe that we need to start really understanding, like, why did we put certain legislation into place? Who's really winning from this? Is this legislation that we put into writing because of an emotional, response, or a logical one? Because a big part of my platform is logic.
Right.
And to be logical, we cannot be emotional. It doesn't mean we don't care. It means we care enough to reason correctly and to do the work, even though it might be more upfront. In the long run, I believe that we all profit and prosper from, taking the steeper path, and by, taking our emotions out of it. Um, and the other part of, your question answer, my answer is vibration, because everything is energy. Having leaders that are genuinely trying their best to come from a place of love and logic, with liberty for all in mind, will create a different atmosphere for everyone, because we do put the spotlight on our leaders. I mean, so many people are just addicted to the news. And if we had leaders in all positions coming from a different position, like I mentioned, I believe that we would have a very positive shift very quickly.
And so one of the things that I see that's happening that we're really lacking right now, which I mentioned to you in a message, is vision, right? So it feels like people are very quick to kind of be against this, they're against that, they want to fight this, they want to fight that. People are very quick to complain, to resist. Resistance has become kind of like a cool thing, a trendy thing to resist. We got to resist. But what's the vision? What are we creating? Where are we going towards? Like, my sense of this, which is really interesting, is like, because it seems like we're so divided, and on a certain level we are really divided. But if you really feel into like what we want, it feels like most everybody wants the same thing, So could you kind of speak to like what's your vision for America? What's the ultimate vision of where you'd like to see us go?
Sure. So before I answer that, I want to go back to resistance really quickly,
Mm-hmm.
because a lot of people don't understand that what we resist actually persists,
Yes, I
right?
understand it, but a lot of people don't.
Right? Because whatever you are focusing on, you are empowering, whether it is good or bad. So the more you resist something, the more you fight something, the more you keep it alive. If you truly want to change things, you have to focus on something else. Usually it's opposite, right? So if you want to get rid of hate in the world, or at least, make it less, focus on love. You can't get rid of hate by being hateful yourself. And a lot of people don't get it. It's like I hear these groups that, they're violent against people that are violent against certain people. And it's like, well, they're doing the exact same thing. Don't they understand? Like, this doesn't make it better. It's like, we're not living in the cave anymore where it's an eye for an eye. We have evolved in consciousness, and we really need to help bring everybody up to that, because we are animals first, before we are human. And so we do have the animal consciousness. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of temptation out there. And so it is an effort, but we can do it. We can move forward collectively, not just as individuals. As far as vision goes, you mentioned, that we all want the same thing. And I believe that that same thing is to feel loved, real love. And I feel that because we've lacked role models in society, and not always intentionally, we don't know how to get love in a healthy way, and we don't know that we're supposed to love ourselves first. It sounds very cliche, but you really have to do it. You can't expect somebody else to love you if you don't love yourself. It won't ever fulfill you. And so it's teaching people how to love themselves, which will help us get to my vision, which is, we've been talking about it here and there, which is living in a more harmonious world where people are free to be their most authentic selves, where people voluntarily choose to help one another in the ways that they can. So, something that I think is really important to understand is how I define love and generosity and forgiveness. They're all the same thing for me. They all fall under the category of love. But many people think that when you love somebody, that it can come with expectations or conditions, or when you forgive somebody or when you give to somebody, that you're supposed to get something back in return from that person. And that's not loving or being generous or forgiving. That's being selfish. And so part of my vision is helping people understand that because everything is energy, and energy is perpetually, I don't know if the right word is desiring, but essentially desiring to maintain a state of equilibrium, right? If you give more than what you take, you're going to create an imbalance. And if you take more than you give, you're also going to create an imbalance. And so we have to be comfortable with giving freely what we can afford to give, not necessarily financially, but energetically, and also receiving freely. For someone like me, that's actually been my challenge, is learning to receive, because because I grew up in an abusive household, I learned to just give, 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 and have no boundaries. And I share because a lot of times people think that, that an imbalance only happens whenever you take more than you give, but also giving more than what you take can destroy you. And so, my vision is helping people understand how energy works, how to experience completeness, and how to practice non-attachment, all while being, authentic, because we all have, kind of like an acorn seed, right? Within it, it has a program of what it's supposed to be, an oak tree. Well, we all are, start as seeds as well. And within us, we also have a program of what we can be. And if we are in a nourishing environment, if we protect that seed, that image of what we're supposed to be, and we keep developing it, we will be that. And because the reason I mention this is I feel that many people are afraid to be their most authentic self. And so they go through life, not living up to their potential, not experiencing health, not experiencing love or fulfillment or clarity or peace. And those are all things that we can only achieve by being our most authentic selves.
Beautiful. What do you think about this left to right thing, like this divisiveness between your left or your right? You have to kind of choose your, supposedly you have to choose your side, left or right, and there's this kind of increasing animosity between these two kind of teams or tribes. Like what do you make of that dynamic right now?
It can be disheartening for me at times, especially when I see people that are considered spiritual and evolved, that are taking very firm stances on one side and not open to dialogue about, the lack of integrity in the position that they're taking. I see good on all sides, but because I realize that we're human, I also see the imperfection, which is fine. But I believe that we need to work together as one team, not just Americans, but as humanity, because we are all part of the same species and we all share the same planet. This is our home. And that, if we start to actually work together, not only can we enhance and extend our personal lives, we can also enhance and extend the life of this planet for future generations. And that's what I want to be working on as well. We are wasting so much energy fighting each other, fighting over who's right, who's wrong, taking sides. This is part of the reason I'm not really into sports, because it brings out this competitiveness. And what I've realized is that we can't truly compete or compare ourselves to anybody else, because we're all unique, right? We don't all have the same experiences, even if you're playing in a sport. Just because one team might win a game doesn't mean that they're actually better. It just means that perhaps they're better for that sport, but it doesn't make them a better person. And so I feel like in politics, we're kind of playing sports right now. And it's like, no, everybody has something of value that they can bring to the conversation, that they can bring to the country, that they can bring to the world. And if we can look past our imperfections and listen to each other's ideas and give constructive criticism respectfully, then we can come up with better ideas and we can move forward. And our challenges can also evolve because we have these very low level challenges. I don't know if you're familiar with, Maslow's hierarchy of needs,
Yeah.
the triangle, though, right? And once people have their basic needs met, then they can evolve and focus on greater challenges and create greater beauty in the world. And I mentioned the word challenges because I realized we can't live in a world without challenges. We will create challenges because that's what we do. We like to be challenged. That's how we evolve. And so challenges aren't a bad thing, but I feel that it's time to move beyond the very basic level challenges. And the only way we can do that is if we come together.
Yeah. Yeah. What would you say are some like really key components of your platform that is kind of different than where we are now that you would bring in your administration that's different than what we have currently?
A huge emphasis on personal responsibility. That, as I mentioned about 20 years ago, that was what got me, was just recognizing nobody wanted to take responsibility for the part that they played in what's going on. It was much easier for people to point fingers at others. And I still see this happening. And just, I feel like, back to authenticity, something that I want to emphasize is something I learned from my father, which is it's nobody's business what I do in my square foot of space as long as I'm not bothering anybody else. And what I get from that is essentially to mind my own business. Just don't harm anybody, focus on myself, don't judge others, let others do what is right for them. We all have a different path. We're on the same journey, but how we get from where we began to where we end, it's going to look different, and that there isn't a right way or a wrong way, because it's going, like, what's right for me might not be right for you, and what's wrong for me, may not be wrong for you. So who am I to interfere in your journey? And I feel that government has been getting too involved in our journeys. And so we can't evolve, we can't self-actualize. And the personal responsibility is huge because as I've been learning about the history of our country, and I feel like the founding fathers really had in mind for the government to do very, very little. But over time, I feel like we've gotten a bit entitled and we just delegate all these things to the government. Well, I pay taxes, so it's the government's responsibility to take care of the homeless. It's the government's responsibility to take care of drug addicts and criminals. It's not mine, but it is, because we are all connected. And so helping people recognize that they can make a difference, and that the only way that this can be better is through personal responsibility. You've just reminded me of something else that I want to mention. I haven't talked about this in a while, and it's really important. Um, I had this vision for a long time, and it started with gun control, because I know that's a hot topic. And the vision was that we're addressing the symptom or the effect of diseased people. They're not at ease versus the cause of their disease. And if we keep addressing that, what happens, if we were to allow that to happen, right? We take away people's guns, we take away their knives, we take away their forks, we take away their cars, we put them in padded rooms, right? That's what happens when you do not address the cause of diseased behavior. And so that's a huge part of everything that I try to do in life. And as I'm going into politics, it is to address causes of diseased behaviors, not the effects, because we are going to end up without any rights. And this is part of what I'm talking about. The founding fathers didn't intend for us to delegate personal responsibility. But if we do that, that's what happens. And we're seeing this also, I feel like, with COVID. People are what are we doing? We're not teaching people how to be healthy. We're not teaching people how to develop resilience, how to develop, strong immune systems. We are sheltering people from reality. And whether we like it or not, nature's laws are immutable. If we do not adapt, we will perish as a species. It's not what I want, it's just the way that it is. And so we have to learn to work with the laws of nature in all aspects of our lives, and to not ignore the causes of disease, whether it is literal disease or if it is just a spiritual or a mental disease. We have to address, why is this happening, so that we can change the way that people express themselves in the world, so that they are healthy, body, mind, and soul.
So with COVID, you'd go to more of a root, kind of good at the root cause, more of a holistic approach to the dynamic, as opposed to like mandatory lockdowns, mandatory shutdowns, mandatory masks, mandatory, is that accurate? Is that?
Yeah, I really believe that people should be educated on how to create and maintain health, so that they can make that decision for themselves, what is right. And that's not happening. We're spending all this money to basically weaken people's immune systems. I'm an introvert, so I actually enjoy being alone, but I know many people are extroverts. And for them, also psychologically, this is a very difficult time. I'm also aware that when people have fear, the brain releases toxic chemicals. And the more people are in a fear state, the more it releases those toxic chemicals, which weakens their immune system, which makes them more susceptible to being perfect hosts for COVID to flourish in. Right? So it's just, we're approaching this very emotionally and not logically. Yes, every human life matters, but we need to make sure that we are doing something to build people up so that they are stronger, not weaker.
Yeah, and I know the lockdowns have caused a really uh, extreme increase in suicides and depression and anxiety and child abuse and domestic abuse and poverty, huge increase in
Yeah.
poverty and homelessness. And so, yeah, that's one of the things that I don't have like many things that I feel strongly about, but I've really just seen that like, this doesn't make sense. This isn't logical. It's kind of this myopic. We're just focused on this one thing, and people are being hurt in so many other ways that it's almost like it seems like there's just an agenda to make this one way, for whatever reasons, whoever's invested in that. But yeah, what you're saying makes total sense to me, and I'm really happy to hear you share that.
Brian,
Yeah.
one of the things I noticed in San Francisco, where I spend most of my time, is how much money has been spent on printing signs, on drawing circles in the park, and all these resources that we're spending to shelter people, versus we could spend the money to create different signs that encourage people, like how to develop healthy practices. Right? It's just that, how are we allocating our resources? And there are people who think that they're doing the right thing by staying home, not going out, not really getting fresh air, not getting exercise, not having community. Hugs are great for producing oxytocin. These little things, we are herd animals, we need that. And so I think about just how we could use the resources better, and just it's kind of a shame and an insult to our species that this is how we're spending our tax dollars, without really having any say on it. And we just have one set of experts, versus having a real conversation with experts from all sides. I mentioned my background in neuroscience and epigenetics. Those provide a different perspective for us, and there is peer-reviewed research to back it up as well. And I feel that as president, that is something that I would do, is to invite people from all sides to have public and respectful conversations, so that you're talking about politics having sides. It's the same thing in science. We need to come together everywhere. We need to talk to each other. We need to work together. That's the only way we're going to advance. If everyone agrees with one person, we're not really thinking.
Mm-hmm. Do you have concerns about the inequality of wealth that is present in America and across the world right now?
Yeah,
It seems to
yeah.
be increasing the inequality.
Oh yeah, especially because of the lockdowns in
Yes,
America, we just
yes,
had a huge transfer of wealth
yeah,
because all the big businesses pretty much stayed open, and the entrepreneurs, the small businesses were shut down because they were non-essential. Who has the right to say whether your business is non-essential? Again, this is supposed to be a free country, and if two consenting adults want to do business together and they understand whatever the risks may be, they should have the freedom to make that choice. um, I think about, I don't know if you're familiar with the term 5150.
hmm,
It's
yeah.
basically, if somebody thinks that you're a danger to yourself or somebody else, you can get taken away, I think, for 72 hours or more till they think you're safe. And I always find this fascinating because it's like there's only interference if you're an immediate threat to yourself or someone else, but not long term, right? It's okay if put crap in your body, don't take care of yourself, and you're poisoning yourself slowly or doing it to somebody else. And I wonder if this has anything to do with financial interests, right? Like, why is it, if it's your life, why does it matter if you're in an immediate danger to yourself or a long-term danger to yourself? I think we should always care, but the government getting involved only if you're an immediate threat is it's something that I find very peculiar. And just thinking about the powers that be and who has the money and the transfer of wealth that we've had, which has created a huge divide. I grew up on welfare and food stamps and Section 8, mostly with a single mother. And I just remember how she was always afraid of making $1 too much because she would lose everything. And I think that that's ridiculous because we still have that system today where, and this is back to being authentic, a person is afraid to self actualize. They're afraid to tap into their potential when they have a system that holds them down. $1 does not make or break a person, right? And if the system really wanted to help lift people up, it would work with them versus saying, this is the cutoff. If you make $1 too much, that's it, no support for you. So what happens with these people? They don't try. They're afraid to try because what little security they have, they don't believe they're capable of more oftentimes. So this is, again, an area of legislation that I would want to address, is that we have these laws and entitlement programs that keep people down instead of building them up. The welfare state, it's, in San Francisco, our mayor decided, since these lockdowns happened, that she's going to be giving certain races of people, women that are pregnant, $1,000 a month while they're pregnant up until a certain time of the baby's life. And I just thought, this is not the place for government. How does this make other people feel who are not that color? Especially like, because I grew up poor. I grew up with people who didn't look like me. I'm being categorized as somebody who is well-to-do, even though that's not who I was, and it's still questionable today. I have peace and security, but the government should not be creating policies that treat certain classes of people differently, whether it's based on skin color, whether it's based on how big their business is. We shouldn't be playing favorites. There should be a real free market. We don't have a true capitalistic society. People say that, we have capitalism here. No, it's mixed economy, because if we had a true capitalism, it would look very different.
So let's go. I heard you mention another interview about identity politics. So you're kind of touching on that here. So let's go into that from this recognition of the awakening of consciousness that we talk about. Everything is one. Everyone's at the same essence, right? But we seem to be in this space now where people are going through some kind of a phase where people are wanting to differentiate these different groups and identify with certain groups, and then there's these kind of power struggles between the groups against other groups, and it doesn't seem to me like it's going to lead anywhere anywhere positive. And there's a deeper way of understanding who we really are, as you said. Do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So that identity politics is really something that I believe that I do my best not to get involved in,
Yeah.
because I don't believe that because my physical form appears a certain way makes me more or less qualified for a certain position, right? It's my experiences, it's my inclinations, it's my insights, it's my gifts that make me more qualified for a certain position than another. And it's the same for all of us. You know, we all have something within us that if we develop, we will shine at. And so I feel that identity politics is very dangerous. And I'm seeing that around me right now as well. And I refuse to play a part of that. You know, if I wanted to play identity politics, I could put myself in so many different boxes, but I'm not going to do that because that divides me from other people. As I mentioned at the beginning of this, you know, there's just one life in all of us. You know, science calls it energy, theology calls it God, some people call it nature, source, the X, like the great mathematical unknown. There are so many different names for this one life, but we know that it cannot be destroyed, it cannot be created, and all that it does is perpetually transmute itself from form to form. And so when we recognize that, and I bring up science because I'm a skeptic, and I had to go down the science route to start to believe that there is just one life because I grew up with religion and the hypocrisy turned me off. So people can turn to science today and see that there's only one life. And so when you see that, you start to understand, like, why do we need to divide ourselves? Yes, we're different and unique, but we're all part of the same being. Like the cells of my body, you know, the organs of my body, the bones, limbs, every single piece of my body, they make the whole me. And that's what we are. We make the whole oneness, you know. And it's like, I thought about this too, back to balance, everything being energy. If the cells within your body are attacking each other, that is a sign of disease. And so if the cells within the oneness are attacking each other, that's a sign of disease. And so that's why, you know, learning to be healthy and how to maintain that body, mind, and soul is so vital for us to all do individually if we want the whole to be balanced and in harmony.
Mm. Yeah, you know, it's scientifically proven that there's no such thing as race. You know, it's scientifically, logically proven there's no such thing as race. So it's like, well, why are we still using these categories and dividing us and separating us arbitrarily? It's not even like a real thing. So I'd love to see. I see an enlightened politics that just does away with all of that. Obviously, people can say what they want to say and speak what they want to speak, but on a political level, on a legislative level, it just does away with something that's not real, and we go beyond that. That's
One of my mentors, Dr. Bernie Siegel, he's a retired surgeon and a best-selling author. He wrote Love, Medicine, and Miracles and many other great books. And he says, you know, the reason that we're all different on the outside is so that we can tell each other apart, but we're all the same on the inside. So he was able to operate on us and help us all. But I think that that's a clever way to look at it. You know, it's like if we all look the same, how would we tell each other apart, you know?
mm, I love Bernie. He was an
He's
inspiration to me on my
awesome.
path, and I saw him speak in person when I was younger, and kind of gave him a hug afterwards and chatted with him for a little
Oh,
bit. Yeah, he's great.
I love him.
Yeah, so identity politics, kind of going beyond these, just all these divisions, right? It's like race, or I know gender, something that you talked about, the left, the political ideologies, the left, the right. You want
Yeah,
to say
actually, yeah, so you reminded me of something else. You know, I wrote something recently about being a prodigal son on my way home. You know, it's another biblical story. And I look at the esoteric meaning of it and I say, we're all prodigal sons on our way home. And I have no qualms about referring to myself as a son or a man because I know I'm not my body. And yes, I am a woman, but I identify with all parts of the oneness because I know that there are pieces of me and pieces of you and everything. And so I feel like um, we've been trying for a while to be politically correct, and that's actually creating more division There's lots of things that are coming to my mind, so hopefully I'm doing a good job connecting the pieces here. But, I think about when you call somebody, Asian American or African American, or, I would be Russian, Romanian American, right? What did we just do? We just separated ourselves from each other, but we're all Americans. Why do we need to qualify anything before that, right? There's something you and I kind of connected over, and I am not good at pronouncing his name, but I studied one of his books for many years. Yes, Maharaj.
Yeah.
I am that. And I believe it's him that talks about that anything you put after the word I am separates us. And then, is that where I picked it up? But somewhere along the way, but I love I Am That. It's a great book of transcriptions that helps me to feel more connected to the oneness. And I just mention it because it's like, if we meditate on the words I am, which you probably know, but maybe some people don't, that can help us feel connected to everything, because I am is the only thing that I can be certain of. Everything else is relative, right? If the bigger my perspective gets, the more I change my perspective as well. Like, what I used to think I was and what I think I am today are very different things. And so I mentioned I am because, again, if anything we put after that separates us, and it's the same thing like being an American, anything that we put before that separates us as well. And we want to be more connected. And there's nothing wrong with being unique. It's wonderful, but we're all very unique. There are no two people that are identical. And so if we jump into a group and say that, I am this, we limit our connections with other people, and we also limit our own development, our own evolution. So from a very young age, I remember not liking labels when people would ask me certain things about my preferences in life, and I just say, I'm a fluid being. And now I understand it, because I'm always evolving, and energy is always transmuting itself. It's just it's a law of life. Energy is.
You mentioned political correctness, and I feel like that's a concern a lot of people have right now, is freedom of speech. There's a lot of censorship on social media platforms that's kind of increasing, just people giving their opinions on different things, their takes on different things. And the other side of it is people are concerned about things that could hurt people's feelings, or, make people feel bad emotionally, or, be psychologically damaging in some way. So just maybe you could speak to that, of this kind of this tension between freedom of speech and concern of how one's words affect someone else.
I believe that it is important to have freedom of speech. And because I understand how energy works, I believe it's really important to be careful which words I choose. And as far as sensitivity goes, when you know who you are, there's nothing anybody can say to you that will offend you, because you know who you are. And you know that it's only a reflection of them and what they're going through. And, anger, for example, is an offspring of sensitivity, unchecked sensitivity, which turns into irritation, rage, anger, hate. They're all related. So if you don't have your own sensitivities in check, you're very likely to blow up at the wrong times and harm yourself and others. So this is why it's really important to understand who we are and really own it, believe it. Don't actually have faith. Do whatever you need to do to get to belief, so that you cannot be offended, so that you can stay grounded. But like I mentioned, I do my best. I am not perfect. I am a work in progress, and I will keep working on myself, but I do my best to speak in ways that are loving, but love isn't giving people what they want. It's giving people what ultimately helps them evolve in consciousness too. And sometimes that requires saying no and being firm, right? So I just want to be clear about that being loving with somebody isn't telling them things that aren't true to feed their ego. Being loving with somebody is finding a way to be honest with them that will lift them up.
Yeah, it feels for freedom. It feels the freedom to exchange ideas feels really important to kind of, if we're exploring truth, if we're trying to get at, what's the best way to do something or best way to approach something, to have a society where people can speak freely their ideas, their perspectives, that feels really valuable, and to feel safe to do that. And there's a concern that that's sort of being lost a bit, where people think they have to just say what the one, this is the only thing I can say. I can't say anything else, even though I think something else. So that's, I think, to have that freedom to people to speak freely feels really important for the best ideas to come forth. And then the president sets the tone for how everyone else talks to each other, right? So if there's a president that's fighting with people all the time and calling people names, and then that kind of sets the tone for the country. But if you have a president that's coming from a place of love, and as you said, can say no or can be firm in different things, but is doing their best to recognize the golden rule, each person as a reflection of themselves, then that sets the tone for how other people, it's kind of like a vibration that goes out. And I feel like that's a big reason why you're running, is my sense, because you want to like set a different vibrational tone of the way people can communicate with each other, which is why I kind of asked you that first question, because like a lot of this stuff doesn't need to be laws and punishment. It can just be this kind of vibrational energy, this, I'm trying to think of a word that's not vibration that other people might relate to, just one's character, character that emanates out to, the rest of the country.
Well, whatever we are exposed to the most, what kind of behaviors, people, and so forth, we naturally start to copy that behavior, if we are not keeping ourselves in check. And most people aren't. Most people are just tuned into whatever, and they're not questioning it. And so they allow it to influence them versus, I make a conscious effort when I am watching a movie or listening to a song. If there's something that comes across my consciousness that I disagree with, I consciously disagree with it so that I don't accept it as my own. It's like, no, that's not true. Maybe for them, but that's not my truth, and it's not necessarily an easy thing, because you have to be alert, but that also means that I filter more. I don't just listen to anything or watch anything or read anything, because I only want to be putting in positive suggestions, so that is what I exude in the world.
Mm. Let me ask you this. This is something I feel like isn't really talked about much on a presidential level. But when I kind of vision into like where we're going, I don't claim to know 100% where we're going, but I do see more empowerment and autonomy on local levels, kind of returning to people. So kind of less sort of top-down authoritarian rule from Washington, D.C. to the rest of the country, where people kind of know in their own community what's the best way for them, where they are, based on all kinds of different things that maybe someone in Washington, D.C. doesn't know. So do you see that too as kind of a decentralization of things, and kind of power and autonomy coming more back to the local communities?
Yes, I don't want power. I want to help set people free, but I realize that freedom is a responsibility. And so that's why there's a lot of education that has to come with that. Whenever I first experienced real freedom in my life, it nearly destroyed me, because I wasn't prepared for it, because I hadn't had freedom before. There was no structure in my life. And so I want to help people have freedom, but I also want them to be able to handle it, because you can do great things with freedom, both good and bad. And I do believe that we're ready, and I do believe we're capable, but it's going to take, a few steps to get there. And we shouldn't have just one person in charge of everything. Like we kind of talked before we started this, was I'm in Kern County right now, which used to be 3 different counties. And they turned it into one county for financial reasons. And these old 3 counties have very different needs. And so the old 2 counties are not getting their needs met because of the one county that wanted them to all be the same. And so, we need to really be more considerate and not do things for financial reason. We need to give people and local governments more autonomy. There shouldn't, money should not be a driving force. I want to get money out of politics. I believe it's possible. This year I've seen how easy it is to get money out of politics. I don't know what's going to happen in this election, but I'm just getting started. So I know that, no matter what happens next, I'm going to help eliminate money from politics and bring more autonomy to the local levels.
Fantastic. And how about, let's touch on the environment. I feel like this is one of the things is like, well, everybody wants, almost everybody, like 99.9% want clean water, want clean air, want clean food.
Yeah.
Where's like the environment in your platform?
Sure. It was kind of related, to what I mentioned with subsidies, for example, in certain legislation. I don't think that, I think that we need all those things. It's not a matter of want. I think about farming, for example, we kind of talked about it, but more like, how are we treating the earth, the soil, the nutrients in the earth, right? Because we are what we eat. And so if we're getting food that is lacking nutrients, it's going to affect our overall well-being. And so we need to be more respectful towards the earth in our practices. If we get rid of certain subsidies, I believe people will change their eating habits from eating so much animal protein to eating plants, more, because it's just more sustainable. And I believe that will have a more positive effect on the environment. Kind of talking about, Native Americans and how they took care of the land. I feel that we can learn from them. It's just helping people recognize how every decision they make affects not just everyone else, but also them. Like I read something about recycling recently and how we kind of got tricked into thinking that the way, this was on NPR, the way that we do recycling is actually helping the environment, but it's not. A lot of the stuff is just not, it's not going anywhere. It's just going to a landfill. And so, this is back to, again, having good intentions, but lacking logic. We have to bring logic into how we view the environment and how we do business. And we have to think about not just ourselves, but about future generations. We kind of have an instant gratification culture right now. It's all about me, 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 and today, versus like, I need to think about everybody else in the future so that others can enjoy this planet, so that there is fresh air, so that there is, wholesome food, and so that there is safe, fresh water, right? These are things that we all need to survive. And if we start to approach everything we do thinking about others and ourselves, I think that we will get there. But we would have to look through a lot of legislation and figure out, like, okay, why is this there? What is this really doing? And how can we make this better? Does this need to be completely gone, or does this need to be changed? Like with gas and electric, is electric really the best option? Are there other options? I've heard that there are. And so I think that it's important to have those conversations without money involved. Most lobbyists, they work for big corporations. They don't really care about us. They just care about their shareholders. And so we need to really wake up and change a lot of these things that we've allowed to happen. We can't give breaks to these big corporations either. Just because they employ a lot of people doesn't mean that they're not responsible for the environment. They're not responsible for doing the right thing. We can't give them tax breaks just because they employ lots of people. That's destroying our planet. And we see that many of these really wealthy people, billionaires, they don't really care about the planet, because if they did, they're already in a position to make a change. They don't need to run for president to make a change. They can do it from where they are already, but there's obviously not something within them currently that's propelling them to want to give back and to make things better. They just seem to only care about their bottom line. And I would love to have meetings with these people one-on-one and help enlighten them.
Mm. Let's touch on the media. So the media to me is a major problem, because the media is kind of like our nervous system globally. It's like kind of like communicates everything to each other. So the media, if we're not getting information like the kind that we're sharing here, or the kind of information of what the vision and what's possible and consciousness and, spiritual principles from awakened consciousness, then people are getting this kind of fear, this getting pumped, this fear, they're getting pumped, this anxiety, they're getting pumped manipulation and deception and all these kinds of things that make it difficult. Because my sense is like, if everybody, maybe I'm naive, but my sense is like, if everybody knew you were running for president, you would easily win. That's my sense, right? But I didn't even know you were running for president until a few days ago, right? So do you have any sense of like how we address that, or how we kind of shift the media so it's kind of giving us the information that supports us and everything that we're talking about here?
Sure. We're doing it right now.
I knew you were going to say that.
We're planting seeds.
No, you're
right.
Sure. Yeah.
and no, I think about, I've been wanting to mention it for a little bit to tie it in. I don't know if you're familiar with the Maharishi Effect. It's basically, I don't do transcendental meditation, but I'm very familiar with it. I do my own form, but they've got together a whole bunch of people to pray for peace in Washington, D.C. several years ago. And they meditated on it for a while in person. I forget if it was like 1,000 people or more that came together, and violence dropped for like 30 days, right? Because everything is energy. They had an image of what they wanted. They imagined it as if it already happened. There was multiple people focused, and what's the right word? I'm drawing a blank, but there's critical mass, right? To reach critical mass, it grows exponentially the more people that you have focused on the same thing. So the more people that do have conversations like this and share them publicly, the more people will get together and have conversations like this and share them publicly. That's how we swing the pendulum to the other end. And that's why, I'm excited to engage with people like you and to share these ideas with people, to inspire others to do the same as well. Every single person matters and everybody can make a difference. There's something else that came to my mind. I recently taught a lesson in a metaphysics class on the laws governing the transmission and change of concepts. And one of the things that I taught in that lesson was about thought waves, and how there is no form of matter that can stop a thought wave. You can stop, an X-ray, you can, different kinds of waves, but you can't stop a thought wave with a piece of matter. And so our thoughts, like meditation is really just single focusing. If you single focus on the reality that you want to live in, when you said you don't know what it looks like, well, you can imagine it, right? If you imagine the reality that you want to live in as if it's already here, and you do that regularly, you will bring it about a lot quicker than if you wait for somebody else to do it. And you're very likely to get the reality you want. And if more of us gather together with the same idea and we focus on it and imagine it as if it already is, and it's not just that, it's in our other state, we work towards making that a reality, right? Because it's not just, people talk about law of attraction. Yes, you attract whatever you think about, but you have to work towards it too. And so that's why thinking, speaking, and behaving in alignment with the vision that you want is really important. You can't say you want peace and then attack somebody with your words. You've got to love them no matter what. Love the life in them. Maybe you don't love their behavior, but if you love the life in them, that will help.
That's an important point. And it feels like related to this is kind of the sense of like, don't settle. And what I mean by that is like there's kind of this idea of like, well, this is just the way media is, so I'm just going to tune into it. This is just who the options they're giving me for president, so that's who I have to choose. And it's like, no, you don't. If you don't resonate with the mainstream media, then turn it off.
Yes. Change the channel.
Change
the frequency.
I've been much happier that way. I find I'm actually more informed, more clear, more kind of attuned to the intelligence of what's happening that way. And I think the same thing with voting for someone for president. It's like there's this idea of like, I don't hear this all the time. Well, I don't like the options, but that's the options. Well, no, there's other options. you know?
Yeah.
Oh.
Really quickly, so you reminded me of something I wanted to say a little bit ago, which is about fear in the media.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that the media and the people who control the media and own the media can control you is through fear.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it's working for them. That's how they get people to do things that are not logical, because they get them into a fear state, and so they don't know what to trust. And the irony is that we know historically that government has lied to us, that health professionals have lied to us, the media has lied to us. Yet when we are in fear, it's like we forgot. And so it's really important to understand that. And what you're doing is a great practice. You don't have to tune into that media. You can change channel and tune into something else.
I think that's a great point. That people are controlled through fear. So get people afraid, and then once they're afraid, they're kind of in that kind of reptilian brain, and they can control. They're emotionally reactive. Yeah, it's a
Yeah,
great
give me
point.
your money,
Yeah.
do this, do that. Don't question me,
Mm-hmm.
It's all from fear, and we're better than that. So much
Yeah.
better.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to share or that you haven't shared yet?
Mm. I've been having a lot of thoughts come in, and I could probably spend all day with you, but I feel like I'm in a very good space. I'm just really grateful that we got to connect and have this conversation, and I feel like we talked about some very important ideas and just what's going on and how we can overcome it. And I'm honored that I got to connect with you this way. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really grateful to have you here as well, and everyone else had a chance to listen to what you have to share. And
Oh,
yeah,
there is
go ahead.
one thing. Um, your previous comment about the choices that we have, because this is a conversation I've been having with a lot of people, and it's about voting for the duopoly, essentially, which, as I've realized, is a monopoly at this point. People do have more than two choices. There were over 1,000 people that registered to run for president in this election, and if people actually believed that they deserved better and had the courage to vote for whoever they thought best represented them, then we would have different leaders. We would have a different president. The media does spin things to sway people's decision, and where people feel like, well, I have to choose who I think is going to win, not who I want to win. And the challenge with that is that if you're settling, you're going to have to keep settling when you get exactly what you voted for. And so if people want to stop settling, they have to stop settling with how they vote as well. And that's, a conversation I'm trying to have with more people to realize, well, if everyone knew about me and everybody actually wanted me to win and voted for me, then I would win. It's that easy. Or anybody else. You can create your own movement for whoever you want to support. It doesn't have to be what the mainstream media tells you is your choices. And we see that with polling. In 2016, a lot of people predicted someone else would win. The polls were wrong. And we made history that year, and we can make history again. And so people need to remember that anything is possible, but we have to have the courage to go after what we want and not settle for less, because if we keep settling, we're just going to have to keep settling.
It's just common sense, and it's logic. I was laughing because I know you hear people say, "Well, I want to vote for someone that's going to win." I mean, think about it. It's sort of funny because like if someone's going to win, then you actually be the opposite. You wouldn't need to vote for them. You'd actually want to vote for someone who you weren't sure is going to win. So anyway, but beyond that, the point is like vote for who's true and authentic to you and what aligns with who you are and resonates with who you are, and not what you're being told, you should do or you're supposed to do, which I think is the underlying message through everything you're sharing, right? It's just being true to yourself and authentic to yourself and supporting people to do that in this country. Yeah.
Yes.
So how do people connect with you? How do they get in touch with you? Where do they find you?
Sure. So I don't know if it's going to be video or audio.
Yes.
So I have a website. It's at Sorinne2020.com, and you can sign up for my email list, and you get an email from me right away. So if you have comments or questions, you can always send them to me there. I share the most on Facebook though, because I have a lot to say. I have a lot of ideas to share. And so if you want to be inspired by me or learn more about me and what I'm up to, I definitely recommend looking me up on Facebook. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. But as I mentioned, I like Facebook because I can write a lot there. And then my website is just the easiest way to get in touch with me. And I have a lot of interviews on there as well as some of my values. But I feel like the best way to get to know me is watching an interview like this.
Thank you so much, Sorinne, for being here.
Thank you for having me, Brian.